Hey guys, Ben at ProFixer. Today we're going to be talking about how to do the back glass on an iPhone. I took an iPhone housing that looked like this and made it turn into this. It's a pretty simple process. You just have to follow a couple key steps and keep a couple things in mind whenever you're working on it. All of the equipment and the tools that we used are in the description below. So if you have a housing that looks like this and you want it to look like this, keep watching. Let's check it out. The first thing that you'll do before you replace a back glass is inspect the housing. Check the corners, down the edges, along the inside as well to ensure that there's no dents, warpage, or bends that will prevent the new glass from sitting flat. This is extremely important because if you do have major issues with the housing, no matter what you do, your glass probably won't sit flat. If you're using the tool from Injured Gadgets that I linked in the description below, it'll come with these CNC milled holders for each housing. So select the ones that goes with your particular housing and put it on the hot plate itself. You'll just remove the two screws and put those screws back in, and it'll hold it in just fine. Also, you'll notice you're going to get this acrylic edge piece. This goes over the housing and along the edges to make it a little bit easier for whenever you push the housing down and allow the piston to push out the center of the glass. Here I've actually turned up the time lapse a little bit. I'm using some hot air and we're going to be heating up around the back of the housing itself. This does help to spot heat the glass, which makes it easier to come off without having to bake the whole housing with any kind of high heat. Here I'm working a flat X-acto under each piece of glass, and I'm not actually pushing very hard. You want to make sure that you don't push extremely hard because you could damage that flexible mid plate that's inside of the housing. So right now I'm just kind of working it along the edges and making sure that I heat it up as well, and just kind of taking my time because you don't want to mar up the edges or turn up the heat too hot because that could start actually melting things. We've experimented a little bit and we find that this is the best solution if you're using this hot plate, and it's not too bad of a solution either. This particular spot right there, I actually bent the camera bracket a little bit because it is tack welded on. I didn't realize that at first, but it's no problem. I just ripped it off, and then we're actually going to use a Dremel to smooth that out a little bit later. So keep working around the edges of the glass and work the X-acto under each piece, but I kind of just start and then wiggle a little bit, and it'll eventually move itself under the glass and allow it to come up pretty easily. But realistically, it's coming off pretty easy. It's not too tough at all, and it comes up in pretty big chunks. If you do start to notice that your glass starts to break, that's a red flag that either you haven't heated it up hot enough, or you're pushing too hard with your blade, or you're using too big of a tool and it's actually just crushing the glass, and that'll actually mess up your back plate, which will make the new glass not be able to stick. Go ahead and work your way around the edges with an X-acto. I do use the hot air once again to soften up that glue, and this is actually a pretty easy part. Not as hard as the glass, but just work your way around the edges and try not to mess up that small plastic edge. You want to preserve that. And at this point, we're not using any kind of liquid or anything like that. We just want to make sure that we're scraping along the edge with the blade to get any of that glue that's on there out. If any of it's on there, it's going to lift up the edges and it'll make your back glass not stay on, and it'll probably come off later. So make sure you take your time on this particular point because it's extremely important and will definitely make a difference in the longevity of the repair. This particular part, I am using some alcohol, 99% isopropyl, with some Q-tips to get rid of the adhesive residue that's on that back plate. It does make a lot of fumes, so you can do this part. You don't have to necessarily, but I did do that to get it spot clean. There are a lot of people that don't, and it's just totally fine. The glue will stick pretty good, even if there's a slight residue on there, but realistically you want to remove as much as you can. The cleaner you can get it, the better the glue is going to stick. And there I'm just going over with the X-acto blade to kind of get the little bits of spots that are still left on there that I missed before, and then giving it a little bit of a cleanup with the alcohol afterwards. I did bring up my soldering fume extractor because it was making a lot of fumes, so definitely proceed at your own risk on that particular one. At this point, we're going to fix up that little camera spot there, and like I said, it's just a little tack welded piece to hold it to the mid frame, but we're going to just grind that off and then just remove any of the burrs that are on that piece of metal. Kind of blow that out and make sure there's no metal inside of there because it'll be close to the camera. Don't want to get that in there later on. And now we're going to test fit the new piece of glass. This is extremely important at this point because now this basically proves if you checked if your housing was straight enough from the very get-go. Here it is sitting flat and I can get it to fit back in there easily. And so what we're going to do is we're going to remove that holder, that CNC milled holder from the hot plate itself to use as a brace for the inner middle plate. I'm giving it a once over with some alcohol and also going over that back plate as well to remove any of the manufacturing oils or anything like that that have kind of collected during shipping or storage and things like that. I'm going to glue down the edges of the housing if it has come up for that mid plate against the edge, and going to apply a small amount of glue around the edges and then just kind of zigzag it throughout the back of the device as well. So there's really no special method for this, but just put as much glue as you see me do there, and then I'm going to clamp it. And I am using the hot plate milled holder, and that does help to support that mid plate as I'm clamping these on there. But I left this on there for quite a while. We actually left it on for a couple hours, and then we removed it. But I believe after about an hour or two, it should be good enough that you can start installing all of your small parts back in the device, put the motherboard back in, and put the screen back on. And so here I'm going to show you kind of what it looks like a little bit. This is kind of glued itself to that little holder there, but no big deal. I was just kind of pulling it off because I believe in this one I only left on there for about an hour, but wanted to kind of show you what it looks like. And so here it's looking good. So inspect the inside, and realistically you want to look up on that mid plate and make sure that the glass is sitting flush up against it. Turn it on its edges, check the corners, and just really anywhere, make sure there's no gaps. If there is, you can squeeze it with your finger to see if it's just an air gap or if there's kind of debris under there. Proceed with caution. You don't want to squeeze it too hard if there is a piece of glass or metal or something like that under there, because it could damage the glass. But basically, if it is still sitting flat, you can now install all the rest of the small parts. And at this point, if you followed all these steps and have been successful, you're going to have this housing ready to install and use once again. So as you can see, removing the back glass from an iPhone that looks like this and making it look like this is actually relatively easy. Some of the key takeaways are: don't go too fast and don't pry on the glass because you may damage that internal plate that's incredibly sensitive and flexible. If it's damaged, you're going to have glass that'll bow up, and it's going to be extremely hard to recover from that. Hopefully you found this video useful, and appreciate y'all watching. If you did, hit the like button. If not, the other button seems to work okay too. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. They're in the description below. Once again, appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all later.